It all started with a message that no one expected to arrive from the far edges of the Orion sectors. Long-range sensors picked up a distress signal, a signal unlike any the galaxy had centuries. It wasn't just a call for help. It carried a sense of urgency that made even the most confident alien leaders pause. Several factions across different star systems were sending messages at once, each one describing disasters they could not explain. Trade routes were disappearing, entire planets were reporting missing outposts, and fleets that had gone to investigate never returned. Whatever was happening, it was spreading, and fast. The Galactic Council, which had always assumed humans would step in whenever trouble appeared, immediately sent an urgent request. But it wasn't a polite request. It was an order. Humans were being told to join the crisis response and take the lead in solving a problem that was clearly too dangerous for anyone else. The Council believed that humans, with their history of innovation and resourcefulness, would obey without question. They were wrong. From Earth's perspective, things looked different. Humanity didn't rush to respond. They didn't scramble fleets or send messages filled with excuses. They simply watched. The silence was deliberate. To the rest of the galaxy, it looked like humans were being passive, maybe even arrogant. They were waiting, but not in hesitation or fear. Humans were observing. They were learning. They were thinking. In the past, humans had always handled crises by understanding them first, not by charging in blindly. They knew that acting too early or reacting without complete information often made situations worse. While the Galactic Council thought of humans as obedient problem solvers, Earth's leaders knew that true solutions required patience, analysis, and strategy. The humans were studying every piece of data coming from the affected regions: fleet movements, planetary scans, reports from the colonies, and intercepted signals. Every tiny clue mattered. Every detail could reveal the nature of the threat. Meanwhile, chaos spread across the galaxy. Alien factions scrambled to deal with the crisis. They sent scouts, military expeditions, and specialized response units, but nothing worked. Some fleets were never seen again. Others returned with severe damage, their crews traumatized and unable to explain what they had faced. Ships were found drifting with systems completely offline. Colonies reported strange energy readings, massive destruction, and sudden disappearances. Each failure only increased the panic. Each loss made the Council look weaker. And all the while, humanity remained quiet, studying the chaos from a distance. The Council started sending more messages to Earth. They urged immediate action, insisting that humans could turn the tide. Yet, humanity continued to observe. They didn't ignore the warnings out of pride or laziness. They ignored them to understand the situation fully. Humans believed that stepping in too soon, without the full picture, could make things worse. In some ways, this quiet approach frustrated other species. To them, humanity seemed indecisive, slow, even disrespectful. But Earth's leaders were patient. They were waiting for the right moment to act, a moment when their intervention would actually matter. As humans observed, they noticed something important. The other factions were making the same mistakes again and again. They attacked without understanding the enemy. They tried to rely on brute force. They sent fleets into unknown zones with no proper strategy, hoping to overwhelm whatever threat lay ahead. But the enemy wasn't responding like a conventional force. It adapted. It avoided traps. It struck in unexpected ways. The losses piled up. Entire regions became unstable. The galaxy was learning the hard way what humans had known long ago. Rushing in without full understanding could be disastrous. While the Galactic Council was panicking, humans quietly prepared. Scientists, military leaders, and strategists on Earth started running simulations. They modeled the threat based on the limited data they had, predicting its behavior and weaknesses. Engineers worked on specialized technologies, designed not just to fight, but to outthink the enemy. Unlike other factions that relied on overwhelming numbers, humans focused on precision, efficiency, and strategy. Every plan was tested and retested. Every possible scenario was examined. Earth was building solutions, even while the galaxy argued over who should act first. Even ordinary people on Earth began to sense the tension in the galaxy. Reports from distant colonies were broadcast through secure channels, and people watched the failures of alien fleets with disbelief. They saw planets being lost, trade routes destroyed, and entire species struggling against an enemy they couldn't understand. But they also felt a quiet confidence. Humanity had faced impossible odds before. They had survived crises that seemed hopeless. This was different in scale, but the same in principle. Humans were always strongest when they acted deliberately, when they understood the problem before striking. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council started to lose patience. Messages became more insistent, then demanding, and finally almost threatening. They assumed that human silence was stubbornness, not strategy. They didn't realize that the moment humans said enough, they wouldn't just intervene, they would take control. And when that happened, the galaxy would see the difference between human problem-solving and conventional approaches. As Earth continued to observe, something else became clear. The threat wasn't just dangerous, it was unpredictable. It didn't follow normal rules of engagement. Ships sent by the Council's best strategists were being destroyed in ways no one could explain. Entire communication networks went dark. Colonies that had once been safe became unstable overnight. And yet, from all this chaos, humans saw patterns. They noticed weaknesses, tendencies, and inconsistencies. They weren't just waiting. They were learning, analyzing, and preparing. Every mistake the other factions made gave humanity more information. Every failure of others became a lesson that Earth could use when the time came to act. And then came the moment that would mark the turning point, even if no one in the galaxy knew it yet. Humanity realized that no other species could handle the crisis alone. The Council had failed. Fleets had failed. Even seasoned commanders of multiple species had failed. Millions of lives were at risk, and the situation was spiraling out of control. Humanity knew that if they didn't act soon, it would be too late. But they would not rush in blindly. They would act carefully, deliberately, and with full understanding. That was the human way. For the first time, Earth's leaders openly discussed what everyone had been thinking quietly. They spoke in secure chambers, using calm voices to mask the urgency of the situation. Every piece of information was analyzed. Every possible approach was debated. For humans, action wasn't about ego or fear, it was about responsibility. And this responsibility was clear. The galaxy had asked for help, and no one else was capable. Humans would act, but only on their terms, when the timing was right. And so, while other factions panicked, humans prepared. While alien fleets fell into traps, humans studied. While the Council demanded obedience, humans decided that the time for action was near, but only when it could be decisive. They didn't announce it. They didn't brag about it. They simply got ready, quietly, efficiently, relentlessly. That was the human way, to act when needed, but only when they were certain that their action would matter. By the end of this first stage, the galaxy was watching humans closely without realizing it. Many thought that Earth would continue to wait, that humans were indecisive or slow. They didn't understand the quiet strength of humanity. They didn't know that humans were not just waiting, they were preparing to change everything. And when humans finally decided to act, it wouldn't be a simple intervention. It wouldn't be a minor contribution to a failing effort. It would be a demonstration of human determination, precision, and intelligence. It would be the moment the galaxy realized that humans were not just another species. They were a force to be reckoned with. The first part of this story ends not with action, but with preparation. The galaxy sees hesitation, but humans see clarity. While others panic and fail, humans analyze and plan. They are readying themselves for the moment when the phrase, "Fine, I'll do it myself," will no longer be just words. It will be a promise that when humanity acts, nothing, not even the most unpredictable threat, can stand in their way. And in the silence of observation, humanity grows stronger, smarter, and more prepared than anyone in the galaxy could imagine. The galaxy was in chaos, and the situation was worsening by the hour. While humans observed quietly from their home planet, the other species tried to take control of the crisis on their own. Fleets were sent without proper reconnaissance. Planetary defenses were reinforced without understanding the enemy, and specialized squads were deployed without a clear strategy. Each attempt, however, ended in failure. Ships went missing, colonies were damaged, and communication networks were disrupted. The aliens had expected their military might and advanced technology to be enough, but they had not accounted for an opponent they could not predict. The first fleets, sent to investigate, were completely unprepared for what they faced. They encountered strange energy patterns that disabled navigation systems and weapons. Their sensors couldn't track the enemy, and the ships were forced into blind maneuvers. Entire squadrons disappeared without sending a single signal back. Commanders who survived barely returned with reports that were fragmented and incoherent. The stories they told were unbelievable, even to their own species. Ships had been torn apart without warning. Entire colonies had vanished, and strange, unexplainable forces had interfered with every attempt to respond. Panic was spreading, and even seasoned leaders were losing their composure as the chaos unfolded. Blame quickly moved from the threat itself to those who were not acting Earth. The Galactic Council, frustrated by the failures of their fleets, sent urgent messages demanding that humans intervene immediately. If humans don't step in, the situation will be irrecoverable, the Council warned. But Earth did not respond, not because they didn't care, but because they were studying every mistake, every failed maneuver, and every lost opportunity to understand what they were truly dealing with. Humans had seen similar patterns before in their own history. Acting too soon, without understanding the full picture, often caused more harm than good. Meanwhile, humanity on Earth analyzed the reports that were coming in from across the galaxy. They looked at fleet trajectories, energy anomalies, destroyed colonies, and missing communications. They carefully cross-checked every piece of data, seeking patterns in the chaos. And slowly, a picture began to emerge. The threat was not acting randomly. It had strategy, intelligence, and adaptability. The more the alien empires attacked, the more the threat learned, adjusted, and outmaneuvered them. Humanity realized that this was not a fight that could be won by force alone. It required careful planning, precise execution, and an understanding of the enemy's behavior. The failed interventions also revealed the weaknesses of the galactic empires themselves. They had relied on their numbers, their advanced weapons, and their hierarchical command structures. But these strengths became weaknesses when faced with an unpredictable enemy. Fleets were too rigid, communications were too slow, and commanders were too focused on following orders rather than adapting to changing conditions. The result was repeated disaster. Ships were lost, colonies were abandoned, and entire regions fell into confusion. Humanity noted these failures carefully, realizing that any action they took would need to avoid the same mistakes. On Earth, the sense of urgency grew. The human leaders knew that waiting too long could mean catastrophe for countless lives across the galaxy. They also knew that rushing in like the other factions would be equally disastrous. The solution had to be different. It had to be precise. It had to be thoughtful. Unlike the alien fleets, humans didn't see every setback as a reason to panic. They saw them as lessons. Every failure of the other species provided valuable insight into the enemy's strategies, weaknesses, and tendencies. Humanity was learning faster than anyone else, and that gave them an advantage the galaxy didn't even realize yet. At the same time, ordinary humans were beginning to sense the magnitude of the crisis. Reports from distant colonies were broadcast securely, and people watched images of destroyed outposts and abandoned fleets with shock and disbelief. Unlike the alien empires, humans did not respond with fear. They responded with calm focus. Across research labs, command centers, and even universities, people began contributing to understanding the threat. Data analysts, engineers, and strategists worked together to create simulations, test theories, and predict the enemy's next moves. While the galaxy panicked, Earth's citizens were quietly preparing for the moment when humanity would finally step in. Not everyone in the galaxy understood the human approach. Some saw their patience as weakness. Some dismissed their lack of immediate action as arrogance. The Council grew increasingly frustrated, sending warnings that humans were being reckless by waiting too long. But Earth's leaders ignored these criticisms. They had seen the consequences of rash decisions before, both in their own history and in the failures unfolding across the stars. Humans understood that timing was everything. Acting too soon without full understanding would mean failure. Acting at the right moment, with knowledge, strategy, and precision, would ensure success. Meanwhile, alien factions continued to suffer losses. Ships were destroyed in ways they couldn't explain. Entire colonies disappeared, and some species began blaming each other for mistakes. Rivalries grew, cooperation broke down, and trust eroded. Each failed attempt made the situation worse, creating a cycle of panic and desperation. Humanity observed quietly, knowing that chaos was the enemy's greatest ally, but also humanity's opportunity. They studied every error, every misstep, and every pattern that could be used to their advantage when the time came to act. Humanity also discovered something else. The enemy wasn't just powerful, it was intelligent. It could adapt, learn, and anticipate moves from the alien empires. Every attack the other species launched taught it something new, making it stronger and more unpredictable. Humanity realized that brute force alone would not work. The solution required intelligence, creativity, and careful planning. Earth's leaders knew they had to prepare a strategy that the enemy could not anticipate, one that would neutralize it without repeating the mistakes of others. By the time humanity had fully understood the nature of the threat, the Galactic Council's patience had run out. They were desperate, sending increasingly urgent messages, pleading for humans to intervene. Yet Earth did not act immediately. They had learned from the failures of others. Intervention without understanding would not solve the crisis, it could make it worse. Humans were not motivated by pride, recognition, or fear. They were motivated by responsibility, by the knowledge that if they did not act correctly, countless lives would be lost. Their silence was not weakness. It was preparation. As humanity observed, they began quietly building plans for intervention. Engineers worked on advanced technologies capable of neutralizing the enemy's strengths. Strategists developed scenarios to predict its next moves. Fleets were secretly prepared for rapid deployment, but they would not launch until Earth had full understanding. Every step was deliberate. Every detail was analyzed. Humans were learning from every failure, every lost colony, every destroyed ship across the galaxy. By the time they decided to act, they would be unstoppable. Even ordinary humans began to feel the weight of responsibility. While the alien empires panicked and argued among themselves, people on Earth stayed focused on finding solutions. Scientists tested new technology, mathematicians calculated probabilities, and analysts monitored every report from the affected sectors. Humanity was preparing not just to respond, but to solve the crisis in a way no one else could. Every failure of the alien fleets became a lesson for humanity. Every mistake an opportunity to gain insight. And as the chaos spread further, humanity realized the truth. No one else could solve this problem. The alien empires had failed repeatedly. Fleets were destroyed. Colonies were lost. Communication was breaking down. The Council had exhausted all conventional options. Only humans had the combination of strategy, creativity, and adaptability to face the threat. But humanity would not act recklessly. They would strike only when fully prepared. They would act not as a part of the Council's forces, but on their own terms with full control over the situation. By the end of this stage, the galaxy remained in chaos, but humanity had gained clarity. They had studied the threat, learned from the failures of others, and prepared solutions that no other species could imagine. The alien empires were still panicking, still arguing, still making mistakes, while humans quietly organized their strategy. Every error made by others became a step toward humanity's eventual intervention. Every failure taught them something about the enemy, about the environment, and about the weaknesses of those who claimed to be capable of solving the crisis. And so, while the rest of the galaxy struggled, humans watched, learned, and prepared. They did not act yet, because timing was everything. They would intervene when the moment was right, when they could guarantee success. And when that moment came, it would not just be an intervention, it would be a demonstration of human capability, intelligence, and determination. The galaxy had not yet seen what humans could do. It was only a matter of time. Humanity's patience, observation, and preparation would soon be tested. The failures of the alien empires had set the stage. The chaos, the panic, and the lost lives had created the perfect conditions for humans to act decisively. And when they finally said, "Fine, we'll do," the turning point came quietly, without warning, yet it was felt across the galaxy. Humanity had been observing for months, learning from every failure of the alien empires, analyzing patterns, and preparing for the moment when they would finally act. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council was still in panic mode. Fleets had been lost, colonies destroyed, and communication networks were fractured. The situation was deteriorating faster than anyone could have imagined. And yet, Earth remained silent. That silence was not empty. It was full of calculation, strategy, and careful planning. Humans had watched as alien fleets tried again and again to confront the threat. Each time, they underestimated it. Each time, they acted with arrogance or fear, and each time, they failed. Ships disappeared, planets were evacuated, and entire regions were thrown into chaos. Humanity observed it all, understanding the enemy in ways the Council and other species could not. Every error was a lesson. Every failure was an opportunity. First sign that humanity had reached its breaking point came from a report that chilled even the most stoic leaders on. Earth, a neutral colony settlement humans had helped establish decades earlier, had been destroyed. Entire cities were wiped out. Civilians and scientists, families and workers, all gone in an instant. The details were horrifying. Energy readings showed massive explosions, systems failure, and a force that defied conventional understanding. Humanity did not panic. They felt something else, resolve. This was the moment when it became clear that waiting any longer was no longer an option. The Council, however, did not see it that way. They continued to debate, to argue, to send more messages demanding that humans act. They threatened sanctions. They pleaded. They tried to pressure humanity into obedience. But humans were no longer interested in requests or orders. They had seen enough. They had studied enough. They had waited long enough. The phrase that would change everything began to circulate quietly among Earth's command centers. Fine. I'll do it myself. Those words were simple, but they carried a weight that no one in the galaxy fully understood. Humans did not say them lightly. They said them after months of observation, after watching others fail, after understanding the enemy completely. And when they said them, it meant that action was coming, but action on human terms. It would not be rushed, it would not be reckless, and it would not be predictable. It would be precise, deliberate, and unstoppable. Within hours of that decision, the machinery of human preparation began to move. While alien empires were still debating and panicking, humans quietly coordinated their forces. Intelligence networks across the galaxy were activated. Specialized fleets, which had rarely left Earth's sector, were readied for deployment. These were not ordinary ships. They were built for crisis-level intervention. Their technology was designed for precision, efficiency, and adaptability. Unlike the alien fleets, which relied on overwhelming numbers and brute force, human forces were optimized to analyze, predict, and neutralize threats with surgical accuracy. Every detail was accounted for. Logistics, communication, supply lines, weapon systems, and intelligence coordination were all synchronized with meticulous care. Humans had studied the enemy's behavior, weaknesses, and patterns for months, and now they were putting that knowledge into action. While the rest of the galaxy assumed that humans had been idle or indecisive, the truth was that Earth was preparing to act with unparalleled precision. Every calculation had been made, every scenario had been tested, and every potential obstacle had been considered. Even ordinary humans played a role. Scientists ran simulations to predict enemy movements. Engineers prepared experimental technology that could alter the course of the conflict. Analysts studied energy readings, patterns of destruction, and the communications of other species to understand the enemy's behavior. Unlike other factions, which panicked and made mistakes, humans acted calmly, rationally, and with purpose. This unity of mind, skill, and strategy was the foundation of what would soon become a decisive intervention. As Earth prepared, the Galactic Council continued to underestimate humanity. They assumed that the human response would be just another fleet joining the failing efforts of others. They did not realize that humans were not joining anyone, they were taking control. This was not a matter of diplomacy, of alliances, or of obedience. This was a matter of necessity. The galaxy's failure had created a vacuum, and humans were prepared to fill it, not to dominate, but to resolve the crisis that no one else could. The moment came when humanity first moved. The alien fleets were scattered and demoralized, struggling to regroup. Communication lines were in chaos. Colonies were still reporting damage and uncertainty. And then, quietly but decisively, human fleets appeared near the conflict zones. The other species watched in disbelief. They expected humans to act as they had, unprepared, hesitant, or chaotic. But what they saw was completely different. Human ships moved with coordination and precision that no one had seen before. They were not simply attacking. They were maneuvering with intelligence, adapting instantly to changes in the battlefield, predicting enemy moves before they happened. Energy shields, weapon systems, and navigation thrusters all operated in perfect harmony. Fleets that had once been terrified or confused now faced humans who had anticipated every possible scenario. Every move the enemy made was met with a calculated countermove. Every threat was neutralized before it could cause further damage. It became clear, quickly. Humanity's intervention was not just effective, it was decisive. The enemy that had destroyed fleets and colonies across the galaxy was being dismantled systematically, methodically, and efficiently. Ships that had once been lost were now repaired or replaced with new superior vessels. Strategies that had failed others were now being executed flawlessly. The galaxy began to realize, perhaps for the first time, that humans were not just another species. They were a force capable of solving what no one else could. At the same time, humans did not seek glory or recognition. Their communication was precise, factual, and unemotional. They did not broadcast victories or celebrate destruction. They focused only on the task, neutralizing the threat, saving lives, and restoring stability. The alien empires, who had relied on arrogance, fear, and intimidation, were forced to watch in awe. They saw the difference between reactive panic and proactive strategy. They saw that when humans decided to act, action was not only effective, it was inevitable. The civilians and scientists who had once feared the destruction of distant colonies now felt a quiet sense of reassurance. Humans were not acting impulsively. They were acting decisively. Every decision, every maneuver, every plan was guided by logic, knowledge, and understanding. The chaos that had engulfed the galaxy was slowly being replaced with order, not because of brute force, but because of human intelligence and careful planning. And yet, for all the success humanity was beginning to show, there was no sense of pride. They did not revel in the failure of others. They did not taunt or threaten. Their actions were guided by responsibility. Their goal was simple: protect life, stabilize the galaxy, and neutralize the threat before it could spread further. Humans did not act to dominate. They acted because no one else could. Their intervention was both necessary and unavoidable. By the end of this stage, the galaxy had begun to understand the true nature of humanity. The alien empires realized that humans were not just participants in the crisis. They were leaders, strategists, and problem solvers on a scale they had never encountered. The failures of fleets, the destruction of colonies, and the chaos that had once seemed unstoppable were now being reversed with calm precision. Humanity had reached a moment of power that no one else could rival, not because of technology alone, but because of preparation, patience, and intelligence. And yet, even with this power, humans remained deliberate. They understood that victory was not just about destroying the enemy. It was about learning, adapting, and ensuring long-term stability. Every move was calculated to minimize risk, protect life, and maintain balance. Unlike the other species, which had acted recklessly out of fear or pride, humans acted with purpose. They were no longer observers. They were no longer waiting. They had become the decisive factor in a galaxy that had been spiraling into disaster. This was the moment that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. It was not a moment of triumph or celebration. It was a moment of responsibility. It was the moment when humans said, "Enough." It was the moment when humanity decided that they would not wait for others to fail again. They would act. They would protect. They would lead. And they would do it in a way that no one had ever imagined, guided by intelligence, strategy, and a deep understanding of the consequences of every action. The phrase, "Fine, I'll do it myself," was no longer just words. It was a promise that humanity would act when necessary, that they would protect life when others could not, and that they would do so with precision, efficiency, and unwavering focus. The galaxy had watched humans remain silent for months, seemingly inactive. But now, in action, humans revealed a truth that no one had truly understood before. When humanity decides to act, nothing, not even the most unpredictable threat, can stand in their way. By the time humanity fully decided to act, the galaxy was already in turmoil. Alien fleets had been lost, colonies were damaged, and the Council's authority was weakening. While the other species panicked and argued, humans quietly prepared. They did not rush blindly into the conflict. They did not try to overwhelm with sheer numbers. Instead, they focused on precision, intelligence, and timing. Every calculation, every strategy, and every technological preparation had been carefully considered for months. Humanity had learned from every mistake the alien empires had made, and now they were ready to act on a scale the galaxy could not anticipate. The first sign of human mobilization was subtle. Long-range sensors detected ships leaving Earth's orbit, but their numbers were not overwhelming, and their formations were unconventional. These were not standard fleets designed for intimidation or show. They were specialized vessels, built for efficiency and adaptability. Each ship had a purpose, each crew had a role, and every movement was calculated to maximize effectiveness. While the galaxy was still recovering from its own mistakes, humans were already executing a plan that was both complex and precise. Intelligence networks across Earth activated immediately. Analysts monitored the enemy's movements in real time, feeding information to strategic command centers. Engineers adjusted weapon systems, shields, and propulsion in response to the enemy's behavior. Every department worked in perfect coordination. Unlike the alien empires, where communication often lagged and mistakes went uncorrected, humans maintained constant, precise control over their operations. This level of coordination had never been seen before in interstellar conflict. The galaxy could not understand it at first, but it would soon witness its full impact. Humanity's fleets moved into position quietly but efficiently. The ships adapted to unpredictable patterns in the enemy's behavior, avoiding traps and striking where they were least expected. The difference between human strategy and that of other species became immediately clear. Other fleets relied on predictable formations, overwhelming numbers, and static commands. Humans relied on intelligence, adaptability, and precision. Every maneuver was informed by data, simulations, and predictions. Every decision was deliberate. The enemy, which had defeated countless alien fleets, suddenly faced a new level of challenge, one it could not anticipate. While the fleets moved, communication teams ensured that every action was synchronized. Command centers on Earth and in distant human-controlled stations communicated constantly, adjusting strategies as the situation evolved. Unlike the alien empires, humans did not rely on rigid hierarchies or slow chains of command. Decisions were made swiftly, informed by knowledge and observation. When the enemy attempted to counter human moves, they found themselves anticipating their opponents too late. Humans were always one step ahead, not because they were reckless, but because they had studied, planned, and prepared for every possibility. Even civilians on Earth played a role in the mobilization, though indirectly. Scientists and engineers contributed to simulations and analysis, producing data that informed real-time tactical decisions. Analysts interpreted signals from the far reaches of the galaxy, identifying patterns and predicting outcomes. Everyone worked with a shared understanding. This was not just a military operation. It was a mission to save lives and restore stability. The human approach was different from the alien empires. It was not about ego, pride, or power. It was about responsibility, and that made it effective. As human fleets began to operate near conflict zones, the galaxy took notice. Other species watched in awe and disbelief. They expected the humans to act as they had, slowly, hesitantly, or chaotically, but instead, they witnessed coordination, precision, and efficiency at an unprecedented level. Ships moved with purpose, anticipating enemy actions and responding almost before the enemy acted. Each maneuver was calculated, each attack precise, and each countermeasure flawless. It was not brute force that defined the human approach. It was intelligence, strategy, and execution. The impact of human intervention was immediate. Fleets that had been scattered and demoralized began to regroup under human guidance. Colonies that were on the verge of collapse received support and strategic direction. Communication networks, which had been fragmented, were restored with advanced systems and coordination. The enemy, which had been devastating alien empires for months, suddenly faced a force that was unpredictable, adaptable, and capable of learning faster than it could. For the first time, the tables began to turn. Humans did not broadcast their achievements. They did not seek recognition or glory. Their messages were precise, factual, and focused solely on the task at hand. Victory was measured not by numbers destroyed or territory gained, but by lives protected, colonies stabilized, and threats neutralized. This approach confused other species, who were used to demonstrations of power and dominance. Humans measured success differently, by efficiency, accuracy, and the preservation of life. It was a philosophy that would define their intervention for the remainder of the crisis. The enemy soon realized that humans were unlike any species it had faced before. Other empires relied on fear, intimidation, and rigid tactics. Humans relied on thought, strategy, and adaptability. The enemy's attempts to predict human moves failed repeatedly. Each strike was met with a precise countermeasure. Each trap was avoided or neutralized. Every loss inflicted on human allies was met with immediate analysis, adaptation, and corrective action. The enemy was strong, but it had never faced intelligence combined with coordination at this level before. This was not just a military campaign. It was a demonstration of human problem-solving on a galactic scale. While other species had struggled with failure, panic, and miscommunication, humans operated with clarity, purpose, and understanding. The difference was not technology alone, it was approach. Humans studied the problem, planned their response, and executed it with precision. They had learned from every failure, adapted to every obstacle, and acted in a way that no one else could match. The galaxy was witnessing a new level of capability, one that would leave a lasting impression. Even as the humans advanced, they continued to learn. Every enemy action provided data. Every battlefield movement revealed patterns. Every threat encountered was analyzed and used to refine future strategies. Humans were not just acting, they were evolving in real time, adapting faster than the enemy could respond. Other species watched, powerless to intervene, as human forces seemed to anticipate every possible outcome before it even happened. It was not luck. It was preparation, observation, and intelligence applied with deadly efficiency. The impact extended beyond the battlefield. Colonies and civilian populations under threat received guidance and protection. Humans deployed systems to stabilize communications, provide emergency support, and prevent further loss of life. Unlike other empires, which often acted with arrogance or selfish motives, humans acted with responsibility and care. Their approach was holistic. The mission was not just to defeat the enemy, but to ensure the survival and stability of the galaxy itself. The difference was obvious to all who observed. Humans acted not out of fear or pride, but out of duty and understanding that by the end of this stage, the galaxy was starting to recognize a new truth. Humans were not just participants in the conflict, they were the decisive factor. Their approach, patience, preparation, and intelligence had turned the tide. Alien fleets that had seemed invincible were now vulnerable. Enemy threats that had seemed unstoppable were being dismantled, and colonies that had been on the brink of collapse were being stabilized. Humans were not just acting, they were changing the entire course of events with clarity and purpose. The phrase, "Fine, I'll do it myself," had transformed from words into action. It was no longer just a declaration of intent. It was a demonstration of capability, intelligence, and responsibility. Humans had moved from observers to leaders, from planners to executors, and from quiet patience to decisive action. The galaxy was witnessing the moment when humanity revealed the full extent of its strength, not just in technology, but in thought, planning, and execution. And yet, humans did not stop to celebrate. They continued to analyze, adapt, and execute. They understood that the threat was still active, and the mission was not over. Each success was followed by further planning, each victory by preparation for the next challenge. Humans were relentless not because they sought power, but because they understood responsibility. They would act, and they would act decisively, until the threat was neutralized and stability restored. By the close of this stage, the message was clear to every observer in the galaxy. Humans were not to be underestimated. Other species had failed repeatedly, relying on force, numbers, or fear. Humans had succeeded through observation, intelligence, preparation, and decisive action. The galaxy had seen the difference between panic and strategy, chaos and clarity, failure and calculated success. And everyone realized one simple truth. When humans say, "I'll do it myself," the universe has no choice but to pay attention. The moment had finally arrived. After months of observation, preparation, and strategic planning, humanity was about to confront the threat that had defeated fleets, destroyed colonies, and terrorized the galaxy. This was not just another battle. This was the culmination of every lesson learned, every failure observed, and every strategy refined over months. Humans were no longer observers. They were the decisive force, moving with precision and purpose that no one in the galaxy could match. The enemy, which had grown bold after repeated victories over alien fleets, did not expect humans to act in the way they did. Other species had relied on overwhelming force, intimidation, or sheer numbers. Humans relied on intelligence, adaptability, and coordination. Every ship, every squad, and every fleet had a role to play. Every action was calculated to counter the enemy's strengths and exploit its weaknesses. The enemy may have been strong and unpredictable, but humans were prepared for every contingency. As the human fleets advanced, the first engagements began. Unlike previous battles that had ended in chaos, destruction, or retreat, humans moved with clarity. They did not panic, hesitate, or rely on luck. They adapted instantly to the enemy's movements, predicting attacks before they happened and countering them with precision. Human weapons were not designed merely to destroy. They were designed to neutralize threats efficiently, minimize collateral damage, and maintain strategic advantage. Each strike was deliberate, each maneuver thoughtful, and each decision informed by careful observation. The enemy attempted to respond. It changed tactics, moved unpredictably, and tried to isolate human units. But humans anticipated every move. Every shift in strategy was met with a counter-strategy. Every attack was deflected, absorbed, or redirected with minimal loss. Fleets that had been defeated multiple times by alien species now found themselves powerless against human coordination and adaptability. The enemy realized, perhaps too late, that it was no longer facing scattered, uncoordinated forces. It was facing intelligence, planning, and action combined in a way it had never experienced. As the battle unfolded, human command centers on Earth and in distant stations worked tirelessly. Analysts fed real-time data to tactical teams. Engineers adjusted weapon systems and shields in response to environmental conditions and enemy actions. Fleet commanders communicated constantly, ensuring that every maneuver was synchronized across light years of distance. The enemy struggled to comprehend the speed and efficiency of human coordination. What had taken months for other species to attempt, humans were accomplishing in hours. Despite the intensity of the confrontation, humans maintained focus on the bigger picture. This was not about glory, revenge, or territorial gain. It was about responsibility. Every decision was guided by the need to protect life, preserve stability, and neutralize the threat effectively. Colonies that had been on the brink of destruction were stabilized. Civilian populations received support and protection, and resources were allocated efficiently to ensure survival. The human approach combined tactical precision with strategic foresight, something the alien empires had never mastered. Even in the heat of battle, humans continued to learn. Every attack, every maneuver, every counter-move by the enemy provided data. Analysts studied patterns and trends, refining strategies in real time. Humans did not simply react, they adapted, evolved, and improved constantly. While other species had been defeated by the same enemy repeatedly, humans were learning faster than the threat could change. The enemy, once confident and unstoppable, began to realize that it was facing an opponent that could outthink, outmaneuver, and outlast it. The enemy's strength lay in its unpredictability and power. It had destroyed entire fleets and forced colonies to evacuate. But humans turned these strengths into weaknesses. By observing carefully and acting strategically, humans exploited the enemy's patterns. They identified vulnerabilities that no other species had noticed. They neutralized threats before they could escalate. They acted decisively in ways that minimized risk and maximized results. What had seemed impossible to the rest of the galaxy was now routine for humans. The alien fleets that had been following Conventional tactics found themselves outmatched. Their formations broke apart, their attacks were countered, and their morale collapsed. Many species began to retreat, realizing that humans were not just participants in the conflict, they were the dominant force. Humans moved with purpose, precision, and adaptability. They struck exactly where they needed to, neutralizing the enemy's capabilities while minimizing unnecessary destruction. Every victory was a step toward restoring order, not a display of power. Meanwhile, humans ensured that civilians and colonies were protected. Emergency communication systems were restored, supply lines were reinforced, and evacuation plans were implemented where necessary. Unlike the alien empires, which had often ignored civilian safety in favor of military objectives, humans prioritized life. Every strategy, every action, was designed to ensure the survival of populations caught in the conflict zones. This approach was both effective and moral, earning quiet admiration from observers across the galaxy. As the battle reached its peak, humans began to dismantle the enemy's core capabilities. Command centers, weapons platforms, and strategic hubs were neutralized with surgical precision. There was no unnecessary destruction, no indiscriminate attacks. Humans were not seeking revenge, they were seeking resolution. Each move was designed to end the conflict efficiently, safely, and decisively. The enemy, which had terrorized the galaxy for months, began to collapse under the weight of human strategy and planning. By the time the confrontation was over, the enemy had been completely neutralized. Ships that had once seemed invincible were destroyed or captured. Colonies that had been threatened were stabilized. Communication networks were restored, and the flow of resources returned to normal. The galaxy, which had been on the brink of panic and collapse, was now witnessing the effectiveness of human intervention. What had seemed like chaos and defeat had been transformed into order and stability, all through intelligence, strategy, and decisive action. And yet, humans did not celebrate. There were no parades, no speeches, no broadcasts of victory. They had acted not for glory, but for responsibility. The threat was gone, lives were saved, and stability was restored. That was enough. Humans understood that action was measured not by accolades or recognition, but by results. They had solved a problem that had defeated entire empires, not through power alone, but through preparation, intelligence, and adaptability. The alien species, meanwhile, were left in awe and disbelief. They had watched their fleets fail repeatedly, their colonies fall, and their strategies collapse. And now they watched as humans, acting with focus, precision, and intelligence, had accomplished what they could not. The lesson was clear. Humans were not to be underestimated. They did not act rashly, they did not seek unnecessary conflict, and they did not rely on luck. They acted because they had the knowledge, the strategy, and the determination to act effectively. The phrase, "Fine, I'll do it myself," had transformed into a reality. It was no longer a statement, it was a demonstration. Humans had moved from observers to leaders, from planners to executors, from the sidelines to the center of action. The galaxy had witnessed the full power of human intelligence applied with precision and responsibility. And every species, from the smallest colony to the largest empire, began to understand what it truly meant when humans decide to act. The aftermath of the confrontation was equally remarkable. Humans did not occupy territories or demand tribute. They did not impose dominance or seek revenge. They restored stability, ensured survival, and left the galaxy in a safer state than it had been before the conflict. Their intervention was complete, decisive, and purposeful. And while they remained quiet, the galaxy could not forget the lesson that had been taught. When humans act, the outcome is inevitable. In the end, the confrontation had proven more than just human capability in battle. It had proven human thought, strategy, and responsibility. It showed that intelligence, preparation, and careful action could achieve what brute force could not. Humans had solved a crisis that had defeated countless others, not through recklessness, not through aggression, but through clarity, analysis, and determination. The galaxy would never forget the moment humanity said, in effect, "Fine, I'll do it myself," and followed through. This was the turning point that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. They had acted decisively, protected life, neutralized a threat, and restored stability. They had shown that when humans commit, they commit fully, intelligently, and responsibly. And while the rest of the galaxy struggled to comprehend it, one truth became undeniable. Humans were not just another species. They were a force that could change the course of the universe itself. The galaxy was quiet, but it was a quiet born of respect and understanding. For months, civilizations had trembled under a threat that seemed unstoppable. Entire fleets had been destroyed, colonies were on the brink of collapse, and the Galactic Council had struggled to maintain order. And yet, after humanity acted, everything changed. The chaos that had dominated the galaxy was replaced with stability, not because anyone else had intervened, but because humans had taken responsibility and acted decisively. In the aftermath of the confrontation, the scale of human action became clear. Fleet losses across the galaxy were reversed. Colonies that had been threatened or damaged received aid and guidance. Communication networks, which had been fractured and unreliable, were restored with efficiency that astonished alien civilizations. Humans had acted not to dominate, not to punish, and not to claim glory, but to stabilize, protect, and restore. Every move had been precise, every action calculated, and every decision made with the well-being of countless lives in mind. The other species watched in awe. They had expected humans to act recklessly, or to hesitate as they had done for months. Instead, they saw humans move with clarity, coordination, and intelligence. Every fleet maneuver, every strategic strike, every rescue operation demonstrated a level of preparation that no other species could match. It was no longer a question of human capability. Now it was a lesson in responsibility, in strategy, and in restraint. The galaxy began to realize that when humans take action, it is not impulsive. It is purposeful, deliberate, and effective. Humans also worked to ensure that no further crisis would arise in the aftermath. Analysts monitored energy anomalies, scouts surveyed previously unstable regions, and engineers repaired systems that had been damaged. It was not enough to simply defeat the threat. They knew that lasting stability required planning for the long term. Unlike the alien empires, which often acted in response to immediate crises, humans thought ahead. They predicted what could happen next, reinforced weak points, and ensured that civilizations could recover and thrive. The Galactic Council, which had grown frustrated with humanity's silence in the beginning, now faced a new reality. Humans had not only solved a crisis that the Council could not, but they had done so with efficiency, intelligence, and minimal loss of life. The Council realized that their assumptions about human hesitation had been wrong. Silence was not indecision. It was observation, preparation, and strategy. When humans said, "Fine, I'll do it myself," it was not an idle threat. It was a promise, and one that had been fulfilled to perfection. As humans moved through the galaxy, they did not seek recognition or reward. There were no demands for tribute, no expectations of obedience, and no desire to assert dominance. Their goal had been clear from the start: to protect life, restore order, and neutralize the threat. This approach earned them respect across civilizations. Aliens who had once doubted humanity's abilities began to reconsider what they had assumed about this species. Humans had shown that intelligence, responsibility, and careful planning could achieve what brute force alone could not. One by one, the colonies that had been under threat began to recover. Supply lines were reestablished, emergency shelters were dismantled, and citizens returned to their daily lives with a renewed sense of hope. Human experts advised local leaders on rebuilding infrastructure and communication systems, providing guidance without imposing control. The difference was subtle but significant. Humans did not conquer, they assisted. They did not demand compliance. They facilitated recovery. And through this approach, trust between species grew. The defeated enemy, which had once seemed unstoppable, was analyzed carefully. Humans studied its technology, tactics, and behavior to understand how it had operated. This knowledge was not used for conquest or revenge, but to prevent similar threats from arising in the future. Humans believed that understanding was as important as action. By learning from the enemy, they ensured that the galaxy could be prepared if such dangers emerged again. Intelligence, observation, and strategic thinking had triumphed over raw power, proving once more that preparation and responsibility were the greatest strengths a species could have. Meanwhile, the human fleets returned to Earth, not in celebration, but in quiet accomplishment. Ships that had been damaged were repaired, crews were honored for their dedication, and every action taken in the conflict was reviewed to improve future responses. There was no prideful display or victory parade. Humans acted because it was necessary, not because it was glamorous. The galaxy had seen their power, their intelligence, and their responsibility. That alone was enough. The alien species began to learn from humanity's example. They saw that acting hastily, relying on fear, and failing to adapt had caused countless losses. By contrast, humans had observed, learned, prepared, and acted decisively at the right time. This was a lesson that could not be ignored. Civilizations across the galaxy began to consider how strategy, patience, and responsibility could be applied to their own governance and military operations. Humanity had not only neutralized the immediate threat, but also demonstrated a new way of thinking for the future. For humans, however, the focus remained simple. Life must be protected, stability must be restored, and lessons must be learned. They knew that the galaxy would face future crises, and that preparation and intelligence were always more powerful than panic or brute force. This philosophy would guide their actions in the years to come. The confrontation had proven that humans could act decisively, but it had also shown that responsibility was as important as capability. True power, humans understood, came from knowing when and how to act. Across the galaxy, stories of human intervention spread, not through propaganda, not through conquest, but through the results themselves. Colonies that survived, fleets that were stabilized, and threats that were neutralized spoke for themselves. Other civilizations, once arrogant or skeptical, now looked to humans as a model of intelligence, strategy, and responsibility. The galaxy had learned that action without understanding could lead to disaster, but careful, intelligent, and deliberate action could achieve the impossible. Even in quiet moments, humans reflected on what had been accomplished. They knew that the crisis could have ended very differently. They knew that months of observation, analysis, and preparation had been the difference between chaos and stability. And they understood that their approach, patient, responsible, intelligent, was what truly set them apart from the other species. This was not about victory in a traditional sense. It was about solving a problem, protecting life, and restoring order. That was the human way. By the time all immediate threats had been neutralized, the galaxy was forever changed. Alien empires, once arrogant and overconfident, now approached humanity with respect and caution. The Galactic Council, which had once demanded obedience, now sought guidance. Even species that had doubted humans began to rethink what they had assumed about this remarkable species. Humans had proven that when they decided to act, they did so with precision, intelligence, and responsibility, and the galaxy had no choice but to acknowledge it. In the quiet aftermath, humans continued to monitor the galaxy. Fleets remained in strategic positions, colonies were assisted with reconstruction, and analysts studied every data point from the crisis. Humans knew that vigilance was necessary. Threats could emerge again, and preparation was the only way to ensure the safety of countless lives. They had acted once, decisively, and with purpose. Now they would act to ensure long-term stability, not through force, but through observation, planning, and intelligence. The final lesson of the crisis was clear. The galaxy learned that rushing in without understanding leads to failure. The galaxy learned that brute force alone cannot solve complex problems. And the galaxy learned that humans, when they say, "Fine, I'll do it myself," mean it in the most profound way. They act with responsibility, intelligence, and precision. They act to protect life and restore balance. They act not for glory, but because it is necessary. And when humans act, the universe itself takes notice. The crisis had ended, but its impact would be felt for generations. Humans had shown what it meant to take responsibility, to act with intelligence, and to solve problems that no one else could. They had demonstrated that patience, preparation, and strategy are more powerful than panic or force. And the galaxy, once chaotic and divided, had glimpsed the strength, clarity, and capability of humanity. And so, humanity returned to their world, quietly observing, ever ready, ever vigilant. They had solved a crisis that threatened countless lives, restored stability across the stars, and taught the galaxy a lesson it would never forget. The phrase, "Fine, I'll do it myself," was no longer just a warning. It had become a reality, and the galaxy had learned that when humans act, nothing, not even the most unpredictable threat, can stand in their way.